Brought to you by Marcus and Mack, a law firm representing injured people. Senator, good morning.
Todd, good morning.
It's good to have you back with us today. Yesterday, you released the contents of a letter you sent to Governor Wolf, again appealing for him to maybe get some local angle to the RGGI regulations that he has proposed and what they would do and how they would impact this area. The governor really has been unresponsive in this, and it's really puzzling, isn't it?
It's puzzling, disappointing, all in one. And what's really disappointing is he can choose to ignore my pleas, but they aren't my pleas. They're the pleas on behalf of the constituents I represent, and particularly the people who work at our power plants and all the related supply chain operations that go to work every day, pack their lunch buckets, and make sure that we're sitting in cool offices and have lights on at night. And his disregard for their concern is what's really upsetting to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And the bipartisan nature of the legislation that has been drafted to address this is what really stands out, because it seems like he is not only ignoring the local folks, which is bad enough, but lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are very, very concerned about this initiative.
You're absolutely right, Todd. And the governor's on an island right now on this issue. And to be very clear, I've said it before and I'll say it again, the legislation that Jim Struzzi and I have introduced and brought forward does not prohibit us from joining RGGI. It simply says that if we're going to go down this path, the legislature must be involved and the legislature must sign off and approve whatever initiative it is. And when you look at the broad-based coalition of support for this legislation, it should speak volumes to the level of concern. The American Federation of Labor, the statewide building trades, the Boilermakers, the UMWA, the electrical workers, you go down through the list of the trade unions and labor organizations that support our legislation. To me, it's very telling, and it speaks to the concern that we all have about their livelihoods. And when you go to bed every night and wake up the next morning and wonder when your job's going to end because of many conditions, but this carbon tax being one of them, it creates for an unsettling time.
Really does. And of course, the prediction has been, and from the coal plant operators themselves, the prediction has been that we'll close immediately. We've heard of at least one of our 4 Indiana County coal-based power plants that they would close immediately should these regulations take effect. And that would be something that would be devastating. Meanwhile, though, the ongoing nature of this and the refusal, the governor to actually meet with people and try to work on this is more slowly causing distress. And we're seeing disinvestment, as you point out in your letter, in the technologies, in the coal plants themselves, and slowly the governor seems to be achieving what would be a very quick dissolution to the power plants right now. That's just as distressing, because that non-communicative nature is just inexplicable.
It really is. And I fully recognize, and I've said before, that the coal-fired power plants that we have here are of age, and nothing is forever. And technology evolves, it changes, it becomes more efficient, and we can't certainly expect that these power plants will operate in perpetuity, but we can plan and prepare for an eventual transition. And that's what I had appealed to him back in February. Carbon capture sequestration is a real technology. It has proven results, and it has great possibilities. And the federal government has offered millions of dollars to advance that kind of investment. And that's what I asked him to explore back in February. And I didn't hear a word. Now, I recognize the pandemic is ongoing and there are many other issues in front of all of us. But at the end of the day, he still is pushing forward on this regulation. And he talks about being concerned about affected communities. But at some point, he has to do more than just talking platitudes. He needs to address our concerns specifically and give us some options or some understanding of how he thinks we can replace not just the jobs, but the tax revenue that comes from these power plants.
I think that's a really, really key point as well. The jobs are just, it would be terrible to lose them, but you think of places like the Homer Center School District and how much is contributed to them, to their local municipality, to all of our municipalities and school districts by the presence of these power plants. That is just as devastating, isn't it?
We talk a lot about the need to invest in public education. And when you look at what these power plants pay in property taxes to the school districts in which they reside, not only those, but also the municipalities and the counties, and it is significant. It's a very large number. I think in the case of the Homer Center School District, it's 5% of their entire budget that comes from one property taxpayer. And so if we're going to see that plant be decommissioned, whether it's in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, we need to understand a strategy to replace not only those jobs, but that tax revenue.
One of the interesting things to me is that plant just had within the last 10 years a $700 million upgrade, and how quickly things turned even after the upgrade, which made it one of the cleanest burning coal power plants in all of America. The nature of the entire business and industry is such that it was almost obsolete the moment that the upgrades were complete. It's just fascinating to me how this is unfolding.
The advent of natural gas has really accelerated this. The market has changed over the last 10 years dramatically. If you would have looked yesterday at the market grid, there was 150,000 megawatts of power being produced. About 70,000 of that came from natural gas, 40,000 from coal, 30,000 from nuclear, and the rest was sprinkled in with oil and other fuel mixes. And then, of course, you have renewables that came in at about 5% of the grid. So the grid has altered dramatically, but what we have to be thoughtful of is that as the market share of natural gas grows in our grid, as that market price fluctuates, so too does the price of power. So from my vantage point, we have a very diverse grid right now that's of great benefit to the consumer, and I think we need to focus on trying to keep it that way and invest in new technologies while maintaining the diversity of the grid.
Talking with Senator Joe Pittman this morning, sent a letter to the governor again asking him to take some action and maybe come out of the office and visit with folks who would be affected by his proposal to join the RGGI, the Regional Power Cooperative, which is what, Joe, 9 other states? Is that what it is?
At this point, 9 other states, yes.
9 other states. And Pennsylvania would be tied to that, and because of it, we're the only state of those 10 that has coal-fired power plants. So obviously it would be a terrible, terrible effect on us here in Indiana County and all across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But this, as we have been going through the pandemic, has been an issue that we have sort of found a way to link this issue with pandemic issues and the governor's power and the power of the executive action in state government. And there's an even larger issue than RGGI and the governor's pandemic reactions, and that is what has enabled him to do all of these things, and that is a shift in balance of power to that particular office, the office of the governor, and away from the General Assembly. I don't think anybody realized until now how big that rift is, that gap is.
It's a real gap, and I've only been a state senator for 14 months, but I've been around a few years within the institution of the Senate, and I can tell you that the relationship between the legislature and the governor's office is at an all-time low. Yes, we've had partisan disagreements over the years, but I have to tell you, Governor Rendell, for his lumps, if you will, from a policy perspective, was always very open and very transparent. And I have to tell you, he probably visited Senator White's senatorial district 10 times in his first term in office, and he was very engaged in communities, and he was all about moving communities forward, and that's what this is all about. And this is where my level of frustration has really reached a peak with the current governor.
It's a really, really a strange situation. Governor's popularity remains high in Pennsylvania, even as it has dipped because of the pandemic reaction. But constitutional amendment, it has passed both the House and the Senate. I believe where it currently stands is the Senate just needs to sign off on House amendments. Is that correct?
Well, the constitutional amendments are completed,
They're
at
completed.
least for this session.
Okay.
And so what will need to happen is they will be advertised prior to this election, but they will not show up on the ballot until we pass them again next year.
Mm-hmm.
So we're probably looking at November of 2021 before those constitutional amendments will be in place. And, at that point, we're giving the voters the ability to rebalance the co-equal status of the branches of government, regardless of who's the occupant of the offices.
Yeah. Does it seem to have taken leaders in the General Assembly by surprise that this issue is out there and nobody really realized it until now?
In terms of the pandemic and the executive orders?
Yes.
Yes. The theory of a natural disaster or emergency declaration, when that law was passed, was never contemplated for something like this. It was contemplated for floods and hurricanes and other natural disasters that would take a finite amount of time to address, and that the needs of addressing the issues would be well known and well understood. We've reached a whole new element here where we're under an executive order, this particular executive order, for a good 4 months now. And, theoretically, a governor could come in and issue a declaration at this point, at day one of his office, and use it throughout his term.
Mm-hmm.
There are other emergency declarations in place, one, for example, to address the opioid epidemic. And it's been in place for a long time, and I think we all need to agree that we need to battle that. But what's stopping him from declaring emergency declarations at his whim at this point? And so that's the focus of the constitutional amendments.
Yeah, and you're right. This is something that would apply to any governor at any time, and it's obviously something that needs to be addressed and needs to be put back in balance. Okay, so Senator, what's the schedule for the rest of the week in Harrisburg, or is there one?
Well, we're on call at this point.
Okay.
We finished up our business in terms of the constitutional amendments last week. So right now we're here at home catching up on meetings. I have several meetings in the office this week. I'll be over in Armstrong County later this week. So these are a few weeks where we're going to try to reconnect with the constituency. And as I've said before, as far as I'm concerned, that's what the real work's about.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we thank you for coming in to join us today, and again in a remote studio so that we're not looking over at each other.
Todd, thank you. I feel like I've been on the deck of the Enterprise here with all these buttons.
Don't press any of them.
Yeah, I don't want to go into hyperspace here.
There you go. It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS, 101.1 FM and AM 1160.